Welcome, everyone, to episode 9 of the MBE Enterprise Podcast, where we talk about money, business, and entrepreneurship with some of the brightest minds I know. Today, I am joined by entrepreneur and founder of Computers for People, Dylan Zajac. Dylan, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
I'm super excited for this episode, Dylan, and I'm really interested to get your answers to some questions going forward here. And I think where I want to start with this, Dylan, is if you could just give us all a little bit of backstory on Computers for People, the origins of it, how it's kind of developed over time, where it's at now. And then also maybe if you want to touch a little on the idea of going for a nonprofit as opposed to a for-profit company right away, because as the listeners will find out, Computers for People is a nonprofit. So go ahead with that, Dylan.
Definitely. Yeah, so I'll take you back to when I was I think 13, 14 years old in high school. My friends and I used to go around New York City. We would subway around to Brooklyn and go to these thrift stores where they had all these old computers. And we would kind of sort through all of these computers, take them, to the store manager and bargain for a deal, and then take them home, refurbish them, and sell them online on Facebook and eBay. So that's where the origin of my technical background and also my business background started. We were making good money. We probably, over the course of a year or two, me and my friends made 10 to 15 grand off of flipping these computers. It was a great business. We were having so much fun. But one day, something sort of clicked, and I saw in these thrift stores, I was like, wait a second, how do you get all this stuff? Like, where is this coming from? And I realized that it's individuals and companies that don't know how to get rid of their old IT equipment. So they either end up in a thrift store, like Salvation Army, or they end up in the landfill, polluting the environment, spreading toxic chemicals. So that was one part. I talked to my stepmom who worked at a nonprofit, and she told me how dozens of her clients don't have access to computers, and it's pretty much necessary. This was back in like 2018, 2019. You needed a computer to get a job, to access school, even before COVID. So the two things kind of clicked in my head. What if I could take all these computers, refurbish them, sell them, or not sell them, donate them to people in need, and this could be a great nonprofit. So just from there, like the next day, I bought the domains for Computers for People, started building the website, got a board of directors, filed the papers to get 501c3 status, and have been building it up ever since.
Awesome. Yeah. One of the things I want to touch on with that right away. You mentioned that previous business you had before with your buddies, just flipping the stuff and how that led into Computers for People. Do you think you've always been an entrepreneur at heart? If it wouldn't have been for that, if it wouldn't have been for this particular idea, do you think you would have found yourself in something, maybe whether it was a for-profit organization or a nonprofit? Or was this just kind of a unique situation that got you into the field of entrepreneurship as a whole?
No, 100%. My mindset has always been like, I don't want to work for someone else. I want to create a business and I want to, do something crazy to change the world, basically. And that started like when I was probably 9, 10 years old. I used to make YouTube videos. I probably made over 300, 400 YouTube videos and was, trying to sell merch, and I did product reviews for all these companies. So it really started with that. And then, I got into eBay. I was flipping more stuff than computers, like before the computer business started. So I knew a lot about eBay. I knew a lot about selling. And then I just transitioned into computers, and I was like, oh, computers are so cool. And just from there, it started.
Do you have employees now, Dylan? Kind of how? Give us a little bit of insight as to where the company's at today and how you guys are doing with that.
Definitely. So we started in 2019. So I've had 5 years to really scale the operation. Um, And now we have 10 full-time employees. These are all paid people that are in our office every single day. And we're also making a lot of impact. Obviously, we have a big team. We're collecting hundreds of computers every month, and we donate around 100 computers a month. Additionally, we're doing even more programming. We're providing free internet to thousands of people. We're teaching classes, so we have our own curriculum of computer literacy classes, where we're teaching formerly incarcerated individuals, homeless individuals, refugees, all the the basic skills of how to turn on a computer, use a keyboard, the things that most people think are common knowledge, but actually, 10% of the population really struggle with, and that's why they're not able to, succeed and get a job, go to education. Um, so, yeah, we're doing all these things to bridge what is known as the digital divide. So that's the mission of Computers for People.
What was the dynamic like when you hired your first employee? Because I'm assuming that they're not necessarily, or at least most of them are not older than you. And that has to be kind of a unique situation, I
Did you
feel
say
like.
they're not older than me?
Sorry, not younger than you is what I meant. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good catch. I assume the majority of them are not younger than you, and that has to
hmm
be an interesting dynamic to kind of work with, you know?
Yeah. Actually, the very first employee of Computers for People, his name was Kennel, and it was actually through a senior employment program. So it's this organization, Easter Seals, where they connect with senior citizens that are in need, that are looking to get work and work maybe 20 hours a week. So I connected with them because we donated lots of computers to their program, and they're like, "Oh, we have this guy Kennel who." Um, he hasn't worked for over 20 years because he has diabetes and a bunch of different health issues. Like, would you be willing to interview him? And this was like my first, this a year in. I was like 16, 17 years old. He comes in the office, dressed in a suit. Our office, for reference, was one room, like 200 square feet. So it was packed with computers. This guy comes in, has a suit on, and I just start interviewing him. I don't really know what to ask him. So I have him start like trying to fix and clean computers to see how well he does. And I literally have this guy start working like while he's doing the interview. Um, but it wasn't even like a question whether like he was getting hired or not. It was like he just started right there, basically.
Just
Um,
an absolutely brilliant tactic to get free labor.
exactly, exactly. So he just started working, and he was one of the greatest employees ever. We had like a real connection, and he was in the office for a year and a half, and he unfortunately passed away 2 years ago. But his memory lives on with Computers for People, and he was such like a committed person. And it's so cool to see that the organization is growing, and we're keeping his memory alive.
Yeah, that is really, really a cool way to look at it. I'm sorry to hear that. But what about since then, as it started to scale, as you've gotten even more, more than just one, two, three, now 10. Have you faced any challenges with that at all? Have there been any, I guess awkward sort of moments, interactions where it's been kind of difficult, or has it been pretty smooth sailing overall?
I've I've now faced like I think almost every situation that could possibly happen like in a workplace that's bad so far. Like you really learn your lesson along the way. Because you don't know how to interview people at the start, as I explained before. I was not the greatest at interviewing. We've had some problematic employees that have stolen from us, um, misappropriated funds and a bunch of different things. Like none of them, we were able to get everything back and you know get them out of Computers for People. But it's really a tough thing to learn how to structure an organization and manage a team. It takes a lot of work and practice, but also having really good mentors where you can go to them and ask them, you know, I have no idea what to do. And I'm actually, that happens on the daily basis now.
Another thing when you bring up having no idea what to do, as far as the tech side goes, have you always been an extremely tech savvy individual, or was that something that, you mentioned right away when you had that smaller business with your buddies, you guys were refurbishing computers. So I assume you had a knowledge base of some extent, but was that something where you had this idea, but you didn't actually have the knowledge base to refurbish everything right away? Or did you immediately start working on it hands on, like yourself?
Yeah, it was actually I had the idea for flipping the computers because I saw my friends were like going to thrift stores, buying the computers, but then just like we're having fun refurbishing this stuff, but we weren't selling it. So I was like, hey, we can create a business. And I've always been the business side of things, not so much the technical side. I really enjoy the technical side. I could see myself just like pursuing that entirely, but um, I've always been the business side of things. So my friends taught me actually how to fix the computers, and then um, from there I kind of took off with computers for people, and I already know how to fix computers. But luckily now I don't need to refurbish any computers. Um, it's not my specialty, I'd say.
Well, I think that's any entrepreneur's dream right there, is being able to scale their venture to the point where they no longer have to do the, grinding day-to-day activity that they don't actually love doing, and they're able to focus entirely on what they really do enjoy. So
Exactly.
congratulations to you for that. I'm sure it's been a little while that you haven't had to do that, but that's it's an interesting topic there, the idea of the knowledge base and of doing it yourself.
Hmm.
When I had Chad Chugum on episode 4, we kind of discussed this, how he was building out kind of a software type of platform, and he had the concept and the idea, but he didn't personally have the skills of how to do it.
Hmm.
But he had the connections, and he had made the connections in order to work with someone, their developer, who did have those skills. And it sounds so trivial, I'm sure, but it is something that I think a lot of people don't think about. Like you might have a really great idea and think that you can't act on it because you don't have the technical skills required, when really that's where your network kind of comes in, right? And meeting people,
Hmm.
connecting with people, and just being a personable person and being able to put yourself out there and get those connections so that those you can handle the business entrepreneurship problem solving side of things, and have someone else handle the technical skills that might be necessary for that. um
100%. 100%. And you're never going to know how to do everything yourself. So you have to find other people that can help you along the way.
and building right off of that is the idea of kind of solopreneur versus building a team, doing
Hmm.
everything yourself, like you just said, with a startup. A lot of companies will start by themselves and eventually get somewhere. A lot of them will start with 2 or 3 people. What's kind of your thoughts on that dynamic, the dynamic between whether to start entirely by yourself, grind away, maybe get to a point where you're hiring more people, but it's more so a case of necessity because of scale, as opposed to immediately starting with a team, um, delving people out into their specific roles right away?
Yeah. The one thing I know is team members can destroy a company. That's that's like definitely a point I would look at if you're trying to find co-founders. Don't just get a co-founder because, you know, I want to push some of the work to someone else. You need to find people that you vibe with so well that, they say finding your co-founder is like, getting into, a relationship, marrying them. It is like that basically. But you also have to find people that have different skills than you. So, I started computers for people by myself. That's sort of like the last 5 years of my entrepreneurship journey has all been by myself, and I like that because I can make all the decisions, and I never had another person where, you know, I I thought I could start computers for people with them, so it just made sense to take it on my own. But now I'm starting another venture, and I have two other co-founders who um, they're both undergrads at MIT, and we just like when we come together as a team, like amazing things happen because uh, you know, one of them's technical, one of them's semi-technical, but the way we talk about where we want the business to go, and we like, not argue, but have these really cool conversations where two people think something's right, one person thinks it's wrong. Um, like having that back and forth is really helpful when starting a company.
So one of the things that you brought up there, Dylan, before we move into the next venture that you're starting to work on, is the idea that you didn't see anyone that you thought was, going to be super beneficial or super necessary to help you with computers for people. So you just dove into it right away, which I think was the correct move and very admirable, I think, because there are people who would struggle to take that first step. They don't want to go out on their own and start something on their own. You mentioned that maybe it was off air beforehand that you mentioned about you had done some YouTube videos when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something you think that played a role in kind of um, allowing you to better just put yourself out there right away, not necessarily worry about what other people think in that regard?
Definitely. I mean, I want to point out that I asked a bunch of people. Like, I asked my friends to join Computers for People, and um, they just weren't really interested. I think the fact that it was a nonprofit, you know, we were going into it not to make money, um, was definitely a turnoff for most people. But definitely the YouTube videos that I was creating was all by myself. Like I was like so into that. I had the camera. I would run around the town like doing YouTube videos, edit them myself. So I, somehow I had like a little bit of confidence, I think, from that, to just go on my own and start it up.
This new venture you're working on now, is that another nonprofit or is this a for-profit company?
Pavement is what it's called, and it is a for-profit company.
When you decided computers for people, I feel like obviously the setup had to be a nonprofit, with the donations kind of, as opposed to a for-profit business. I think that made sense. Um, was that something that was difficult at all for you to, get over or decide? Not really difficult in the sense of that, you are kind of capping yourself. You're not maybe going to become a mega millionaire with a nonprofit business as opposed to the ceiling, the potential of a for-profit business. Was that ever something that, those thoughts crossed your mind or made you hesitant at all, like those other people you mentioned were?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a business structure, but it's true. I don't own Computers for People. I don't, at the end of the day, I'm not cashing out and selling and, making millions of dollars off of it. Um, but the potential and the impact that it has is what, like, I think really like motivates me to do it. Um, for the for-profit, uh, I think it's really interesting because a lot of people go into business saying, I want to make a ton of money, and then after I make a ton of money, I want to give back and start a foundation. That's like, I think that's usually what people do. When I was starting Computers for People, I was like, oh, this is super interesting. I'm going to prove that you can build like a foundation, a nonprofit that's really successful without being, a super rich millionaire person on a yacht somewhere. I'm going to build this in my community and it's going to be massive. Um, so that excited me a lot. Just doing it like the reverse from most people. But now that I'm like, Computers for People's growing, I think we can get it across the country in the next 5-10 years, maybe even worldwide. Um, Now that I'm at that point, I'm like, you know, what's next? I need even more. How do I fuel the fire even more? Um, and I was thinking of different industries, businesses that I can go into. And one thing that just like that I hated every time I went into a city was parking. It just threw off my entire day every single time. I was meeting my friends. I got to go park in the city. I can't find parking anywhere. Or I spend $50 on parking. Um, so yeah, that's what kind of compelled me to start Pavement. Um, and it just made sense to be a for-profit company. I mean, there's reasons for nonprofit versus for profit versus whatever else you want to create. So
If you wouldn't mind, Dylan, would you want to dive in a little deeper, kind of on the idea, the concept behind pavement itself?
yeah, I would say pavement. We're creating a product right now, but it has a deeper purpose, I would say. Um, the current product is to make the lives of parking managers and parking operators uh, much easier. So first, we're creating a license plate recognition system to go into parking garages. We put up cameras. They track all the license plates, the car make, model, color, all this data about the car as it goes into the parking garage, and then we put it on a beautiful dashboard uh, for the parking manager to see all of the cars in their garage. And the one reason we made this is that we found out that 95% of garages right now go around the garage every single night and write down on a piece of paper all the make, model, color, license plate numbers. And then they store those documents for up to 6 years. So we're like trying to eliminate that entirely and digitize the way that parking managers run their garage. But the long-term vision is, you know, fixing parking for parking managers. It's not like it doesn't excite me as much as we want to change the world, and to do that, we need to change how people drive. Um, so we're gonna have an app that helps people find parking instantly. So it's like you used to reserve a taxi cab to come pick you up. Uber, now you click one button, the taxi comes, picks you up instantly. This is going to be what pavement is basically. So you click it, we have the information of all the different parking garages in the city because we have this license plate recognition system. You click the app and you park instantly. But we see even broader and more interesting avenues to go into with autonomous cars. Like, how are they going to park themselves if you can't take a ticket? And even crazier, electric charging, and there's so many different avenues with mobility that we can go.
I think the marketing aspect of that, I had a thought that's really interesting to me. First of all, you would think, you'd have to advertise similar to an Uber, right? You have to get the people to trust what you're doing, the actual consumers of it themselves, the people parking in the cars.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get them and establish a trust with them in order to get them to download the app, right?
Yeah.
Use it. But I mean, before you do that, you have to establish the kind of the marketing, the trust with the actual parking garages themselves. But if you are able to accomplish, both of those feats, it kind of helps you build from two different angles, because the people parking the cars, the end all be all consumers, they get the benefit of obviously using the app, streamlining their parking process, and the parking garages get the benefit of kind of free advertising on the app if they work with you, not free, but if they work with your company. So it's kind of interesting because the product, the idea itself, it does seem like an extremely good idea, and the fact that it can kind of build from both ends like that right away, I think is super interesting. Also, when you guys came up with this idea, you mentioned the point that the current managers of the parking garages were going through and writing things down on a piece of paper, right, caveman style.
Mm-hmm.
um, was that what kind of sparked the idea, or is that something that you found when you were already looking into it?
Yeah. So it originally actually started with street parking. I had this idea for, like, how do we optimize street parking so that I can find a parking spot instantly in a city? So we started with that idea. I I actually went to an MIT frat party where I met Robbie. Well, I knew Robbie beforehand from Computers for People, who both won this award called the Diller Tikkun Olam Award. So I met him from that. I met him at this frat party, and I was like, Robbie, we have to do this parking, app idea. And he was like, let's do it, basically. And then he met this other guy, Jacob, at MIT Entrepreneurship Club. And Jacob is like, he has to be the top software engineer at MIT right now. He's insane. So we came together as a team. We started working on this idea. we realized that it's actually a terrible idea to try and fix street parking because it's been tried many, many times and everyone has failed. So we took a different avenue. We started doing like PMR, primary market research. We went into a parking garage, and the first one we went into, they told us about this problem. And we went in there with the mindset like, hey, what are your problems? We're researchers. We're just, trying to find problems. And they were so open with us. They just, the manager told us everything, we do this inventory, our systems break down every day. There's stolen vehicles, all these problems. And we just wrote down all the notes, and then we went to 99 other garages and heard the exact same stories. And that's kind of what led us to start what now is Pavement.
It's amazing how open people will be when you come at it from the angle of research, as opposed to immediately trying to sell them a product on their front doorstep. Also, side note, I have heard that the greatest ideas and inventions always stem from MIT frat parties. So there might be something going with that one. The marketing end of this, I know this is something we wanted to talk about, and I also want to tie this back to computers for people once we're doing it. Beyond the I think the ideation process, which is another thing I was going to ask about, I think is pretty clear with this, right? You had the issue of the parking problem, and you tried to figure out how to fix it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Started with street parking, shifted to garages. Once you guys develop this software, which I'm assuming, if you have the best software engineer at MIT, I'm assuming that won't be as big of an issue. There's going to be some machine learning or artificial intelligence aspects that are going to tie into this. If you want to touch on any of that as well, otherwise, just kind of how you guys plan to go about and market this product to a large scale.
Yeah. The actual solution to the problem is not an easy solution. Many people have tried it before, and many people have failed miserably doing it. So nothing is easy. Like you are so lucky if you walk into a place, find a problem, and then start making millions of dollars off that problem like instantly. Like starting a business is not easy, and we're still seeing that. Like right now, we're talking to some of the top people in parking. Sounds crazy. We're signing really big contracts, really big letters of intent right now, and we're getting like a lot of interest from VCs as well. But like actually being a successful company and solving the problem is going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of intelligent people to actually carry through. We're creating a lot of algorithms right now, like we're training models, but we're also seeing like what existing technology exists, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and just trying to find mentors as well. MIT probably has some of the best people, best professors where you can go to and get advice. But yeah, it's difficult.
You mentioned mentors, and that's something else I wanted to touch on here as well. It seems like mentorship plays such a huge role in essentially every entrepreneur's journey. How has it played a role in yours?
Yeah. I mean, Computers for People wouldn't be where it is without like my board of directors, which they're my mentors basically. Like, they kind of, I work for them basically, but they are also my mentors. So I go to them whenever I need advice, with staffing issues, with finance issues, all of the above. Especially, my parents, my mom and my dad. Also my stepmother who worked in nonprofits. She is the president of my board, and she advised me today on different issues. So pivotal, it's essential to have mentors. With Pavement now, it's even more important, I would think, in the for-profit world. Having people giving us advice on VCs and how to raise money. Also, people just in the industry. You need to find people that have been in the industry for 30, 40 years, especially if you are just entering. You need to find people that are willing to have a weekly call with you and tell you when an idea is stupid. So Very important.
What do you think? Have you always been able to just kind of push your ego aside and accept mentorship, accept help from others? Because I think that's something that, not everyone has the easiest time doing, just accepting that they're not the best at something and they need help. They need to learn from others instead of, there's a saying I like, which is there's two ways to learn. There's the hard way and then there's the hardest way, right? Most people want to do it themselves and learn the hardest possible way as opposed to just learning the normal way, which is the hard way, right?
Yeah.
Has that always been something that's easy for you, or did you have a moment that kind of changed that perspective for you?
Yeah, I mean, as they say, fail fast, I think. I kind of try to live by that quote. So, you know, if I do something wrong, I mean, I'm not going to fight and say I'm right about it because I probably am wrong. I don't know everything. So I try to, talk to as many people as possible. As I'm learning, I'm getting more confident, I think, and I'm able to, make harder decisions myself. But it's really important to take feedback and find mentors that will give you honest feedback. It's not good to have mentors that'll just say, "Oh, you're doing so great, good job." That's not a good mentor. You need to find someone new. Um, so yeah, I think it's very important to know when you're wrong and be able to adapt and be agile.
I think what you said there, the adaptation to it is so huge. I mean, really in all regards, whether it's switching mentors, adapting to one that's maybe not as good, pivoting to a new one, or pivoting with business ideas. Were there any major pivots that you faced? Well, I realize pavement is new, but swinging back to computers for people, were
Mhm.
there any major pivots that you faced along the way, or even times that you were like, am I going to be able to make this work? Do I have to give up on this? And then you were able to pivot and get around it, or push through and just work through it.
Yeah, I would say right before I went to college. So I was a senior in high school. Um, Computers for People had no paid employees. Kennel was with us. We had some volunteers. We had a little office space in New Jersey. Um, but my board and everyone was telling me, you know, this is the time. You go to college. You're gonna leave this thing behind, and it's gonna die out. You might as well give it to the library so that they can continue it, you know, for teens to enjoy, something like that. Um, but I just like couldn't let that happen. And I was working probably 80 hours a week, from like when I graduated from high school to when I went to college because I'm now in Massachusetts, so there's no way I could run things in person. Um, so I applied for like probably two or three massive grants where I was like, these are gonna help me hire staff. And I'm counting on these grants. And one after another, denied, denied, denied. I had a month left before I went to college with very little money in the bank, not enough to hire someone. Um, it was extremely stressful. So I had a fundraiser event. I planned it like 2 weeks before it happened. Ended up, we had 100 people come and we raised like $40,000 at that event. And with like 2 weeks before I left for school, we hired someone and he like, managed in-person computers for people for a year and a half. So it was like almost died out, but then, you know, like that kept it going, and now it's really thriving. And I still manage all the staff from remotely from Massachusetts. So yeah.
That has to be something, though, that was extremely beneficial to your mindset. The idea that you could not only set up a fundraiser in 2 weeks and have it be successful, but also the idea that it was successful and you had people supporting you and willing to help out. How did that play a role? And I guess kind of helping you push through. Obviously, the employee was the main hire, but just from the mental side of things, knowing that, wow, there is this many people that support this and have my back and want to see this succeed.
Yeah, I mean, you never like realize it until everyone's in a room, and I get to give a speech, and like then we have also clients come into the event, and they also talk about how the computer has impacted them. They've gotten a job, they've gone back to high school or college, and it kind of like reinvigorates you, to some extent. Um, but also, I think if I didn't have to go to school, computers for people also wouldn't be where it is um, today. It like forced me to get my act together and create this structure that's sustainable for the long term. So like even if I leave tomorrow, computers for people will still be running. I don't know if that's true right now, um, but I'm getting there. That's the goal in any organization, for it to live on and keep growing.
I love that you mentioned that because it really is, right? The organization, it's one thing they talk about with building a brand that is centered completely around yourself. If you do that, sometimes it's easier starting out because you already have a following.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, especially you think of like the influencer age, like that sort of thing, right? Um, and this is not a knock on that at all. But one of the things with that is when your brand is entirely built around your own persona, you can't really pivot out of it, right? You can't
Hmm.
really like it's not as easy to set up a structure to where it's no longer me and my face and the person that everyone recognizes. It's no longer me on the camera. It's some person I just hired. And
Yeah.
then you expect it to have the same effect. It just won't when a brand is entirely built around your
Yeah.
own
It's not
personality.
scalable.
Exactly. So
Definitely.
I think that is extremely, I mean, obviously smart. You're a smart guy that you knew to do that, but it also is beneficial, like you said, that it kind of forced you to do that and have that structure so that that opens the door for you to work on something like Pavement, right? Like another venture that you maybe wouldn't have been able to do if you'd have had to be focusing all your time on computers for people the entire time. And that's actually one thing I want to ask you about too, tying right into that, is your work school life balance, right? This is a common thing people talk about, work life balance. You have to have this. What are kind of your thoughts on that? And what's your current state of, work school balance? Because you're also, like you mentioned, in case people didn't hear, you're also in college, right? You're a junior majoring in business management and entrepreneurship,
Hmm.
which I'm sure is beneficial with what you're doing right now, obviously. But kind of what's that work school life balance been like for you?
Yeah, it's terrible, to be honest. Like I've been doing pretty well the last 2 years, but now I'm a junior. Um, I'm doing, three things at once. Over the summer, Computers for People grew from like 2 employees to 10 employees, which was a big jump. So now I actually have a full-time job plus school, plus I'm trying to run, also do Pavement as well. So it's not going well. I attend all my classes except for yesterday, actually. I had to miss, and I had to drive down for a client meeting for Pavement. We drove 8 hours to New York City and back. Meanwhile, in the car, I had to like run payroll for Computers for People and do a bunch of other random stuff. Um, but it's very difficult. The one thing I would say is there are many hours in the day. So, um, whatever, you're doing now, like most people just spend probably 5 hours of their day like watching YouTube or TikTok. Uh, there are plenty of hours to start a business or do something that you enjoy. So, yeah, don't limit yourself.
Has the drive for you always come from the want, the striving to change the world? And when I ask that, I mean a lot of people burn out, right?
Hmm.
Entrepreneurs, they'll burn out. It gets hard, it gets difficult, like you said. How have you kind of found so far the ability to not burn out, the ability to stay disciplined, stay diligent, working on not only computers for people, but also, schoolwork and Pavement? I've been really sticking to everything and not just burning out and staying after it.
Yeah, I don't really understand what burning out means, but it I could see that like, oh, it just kind of, fizzles out. Like I'm not interested in it anymore. It doesn't provide me any satisfaction, so I'm just gonna leave it, and I'm burned out. Um, I understand being like extremely tired. Like when I have so much stuff to do, and like I start losing sleep, then I get sick. and I could see that as like burning out. Um, but otherwise, like it's just, I guess, my desire to change the world, to have a large impact. Um, I just enjoy like building stuff too. I just want to build stuff. I want to make it massive, and it's fun. I get, especially with pavement, I get to, hang out with, these two other guys, and we're just like building a business, you know? And with Computers for People, I get to hang out with all these people that are so passionate about the mission. And every day we get to give, 2 or 3 computers to people that didn't have them before. So it's like, how could I not want to do this, every day?
Well, and I think that you're able to curb that sort of burnout really well because you started with a nonprofit. They should
Mhm.
almost make that a requirement, right? Because that forces you to actually care about the impact that you're creating,
Yeah.
helping other people as opposed to just doing it to make the money. And I think that's exactly why you wouldn't understand, as much that kind of burnout concept. Because I think what people, first of all, there's burnout within like sports, right? They talk about that a lot. I guess I've always been an athlete my whole life. They'll, get young kids playing one sport year round, and they'll do it constantly, and by the time they're, whatever age, they don't like it anymore because they've
Mhm.
just had to do it the entire year for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, in business, it's a little different. What I think it is people who, you know, they see entrepreneurship as this field, this trendy, catchy sort of field where you can make, endless amounts of money and get insanely rich. And you see people advertising get rich quick schemes all the time. And it makes it seem like it's just easy. It's just this, it's a walk in the park. It's just automatic.
Mhm.
When really it's not. It's a field of discipline just like anything else that takes a ton of practice, a ton of failures, and takes hard work and a long time. And I think people don't always see that. So they go into entrepreneurship with the idea that this is just a get rich quick scheme. I'm just going to do this, make a ton of money, and get out.
Mhm.
And those are the people, when I reference burnout, you once again wouldn't see it because you started from that nonprofit end that quite literally was just only, focused on making an impact, scaling it up. So it was large scale impact, but not necessarily just monetary gains in your own pocket, as opposed to the people who just look at it purely from the money side of things. There's a quote by Alex Hormozy. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. It's one I really like, and I've said before on this.
Mhm.
It's, if you get into business to make money, you won't be very happy. If you get into business to make people happy, you'll make a lot of money. And just that idea, because you'll stick with it. That's why
Mhm.
people burn out. They're doing something they just think is to make money quick. They're doing it to make the money, not to actually help the consumer or whoever is the recipient of their services. And then they'll burn out when they don't see, tons of income right away. And maybe a couple people get lucky, like you mentioned before, but most of the time that's not the case. So yeah, I think that is an interesting question and an interesting response from you,
Yeah. It's
honestly,
like they
because
don't actually burn out. They just get bored, you know? They're not making money. So why do this? Oh, I'm burned out, you know?
yeah,
It's just like,
yeah.
it's almost an excuse.
Well,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
It's kind of just like you said, an excuse for being lazy, like in a way, or like not being
You're
creative enough.
lazy. You're
Well,
lazy.
if you're not, you know what I mean, though, if you're
Yeah.
not willing to put in the work, if that's what's required,
Yeah.
that's because that is the thing with entrepreneurship. You have the unlimited risk, the unlimited reward potential, essentially.
Mhm.
Well, you also have the unlimited risk potential because the whole concept of it is that's why it's interesting when people try to get into entrepreneurship and then they immediately want like a salary. Like you should try and monetize as quick as possible in most situations, but when they immediately want a salary, it's like, okay, so you just want a job. Like
Yeah.
you just want a job then. You don't want the actual game of entrepreneurship in a way or the long-term goal of making an impact. So
Exactly.
I think that's yeah, interesting. With Computers for People, going back to this, the marketing end of things. We talked about this a little bit with Pavement. How did you kind of approach the marketing end of things, specifically to grow and scale Computers for People?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we have not spent any money on advertising I mean, we spent a little bit on marketing in terms of like getting signs and T-shirts and those sorts of things, but it was really through word of mouth and PR. It started off like the first computers I got, I went on Facebook Marketplace and I just started, messaging people that were selling computers. I said, hey, we'll give you a tax receipt if you donate the computer to Computers for People, and it'll go to someone in need. And out of the 20 people that I messaged, one or two would say, yeah, come pick it up because, it's taking up room in my house and I could take a tax receipt. So it just started like that, just reaching out to people that I knew, people that my board members knew. But then once it started catching on and we're donating computers to people in need, then I send that story to local news outlet, or people start reaching out, wanting to do stories, and it's like perfect. It's like this cycle where we do good, they do an article, we get more computers in. It's like this never-ending cycle that we could use to fuel the organization from the start. So from there, we got a couple small local news, and then we got like NewJersey.com, and then after that we got a commercial actually with Verizon where we did full like 5-minute documentary that was like aired on all Yahoo and AOL platforms. And then after that we did like Forbes and ABC and all these things where it just kind of pushed the organization up, gave us credibility. But now it's like also boosted our SEO a lot. That's huge because now if you search like donate my computers in New Jersey or donate my computer in New York, then Computers for People will be one of the top results there. So that's kind of the marketing strategy that we had, and we're still using that to this day. But we're trying to get even bigger. We're trying to get like every corporation to donate their old computers to us.
This might be a question that sounds really stupid, and I'm going to be the first one to admit that I am not an expert at all when it comes to like the nonprofit realm of business.
Uh-huh.
You talked about the competitive landscape a bit as far as pavement goes, as like other people have done. They've tried to do street parking, it hasn't worked. There are probably other people trying to do what you're trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like large language models, they're becoming an extremely popular thing, obviously, in the world of AI. What about with Computers for People? Was there a competitive landscape aspect that you had to get over the hump right away? Other businesses trying to, you're all trying to help people, right? With a nonprofit, but trying to
It
help people
exists.
better.
It
Yeah.
exists. The nonprofit world is just as competitive as the for-profit world. Unfortunately, it's sad, but applying for grants, it's always a competition. Um, with my particular industry, I guess, it's nonprofits that are donating computers. They're called refurbishers. A lot of people call them refurbishers, and there's certain ones. I would say 3 big ones. One's in like Illinois, actually Minnesota, California, and Texas. So those are like the big ones, the big players. And I always like when I was first starting, I was like, oh, it's a competition, and we're gonna do it bigger and better. Um, but over the years, I kind of saw like their approach is completely different than our approach. Their approach is we're getting computers in, and we're selling low cost computers to individuals in need. That kind of differs, I think, from my mindset of, hey, these are people in need. Our goal is to bridge the digital divide. These people can't afford a computer, so we're going to give them a free computer. We think that's the ethical thing to do as a charity. So that's sort of our approach, our edge, I think. We're able to refurbish and donate a computer for around $70. That's our total like organizational cost to do that, which is pretty impressive, I think. Most of these other places, it's $100, a bit more. But also, the industry of IT asset disposal is huge. So I don't know if you've heard of like Iron Mountain or some of there's really big electronic recycler players. And this is growing as e-waste surpasses like 70 million metric tons in the United States. And 80% of it goes into the landfill. So we need all these companies to come in and recycle the stuff, resell the stuff. So it's a huge industry, like multi-billion-dollar industry. besides from all these nonprofit players. So we're sort of now entering that industry as well and becoming not as much a competitor, but um, an ally, I would say. So we're coming in and saying, hey, we can accept all your IT equipment. So we take everything in, we set aside all the laptops, all the computers we can donate, and then all the other stuff we give to these ITAD companies where they properly recycle it and they resell the stuff that they can resell to other companies, individuals, so that Computers for People now has an unrestricted funding source so that we can run our programming sustainably. So we're trying to grow in multiple aspects here.
That's really, yeah, interesting and extremely smart as far as what you just mentioned there, getting that unlimited kind of supply in a way. Was that your idea particularly? Was that credited to the board, you would say? Or, some of those major ideas, are a lot of them you, or a lot of them the help of your mentors?
Um, I would say my mentors are definitely helpful, but very few people know about the nonprofit refurbisher landscape. I've been to like multiple conferences across the country, met all these other nonprofits, met these ITAD companies, um, and I saw like, hey, these are where people are falling behind, and this is where we can get an edge. My board is and mentors are great at like saying, hey, we need more unrestricted funding versus restricted. That means, we have funding coming in that's just cash that we can use for whatever we want, programs, a staff, you know, any of the above. That's obviously complies with nonprofit guidelines. But then restricted funding is like we get grants from the federal government where they'll like they'll audit us. They got to make sure that money, that 17, $18 per hour goes directly to that staff member that's doing this task and meeting these deliverables. That's restricted funding. So getting more unrestricted funding allows us to grow the organization and do stuff that like actually matters, you know, um, along with the programs that are restricted.
You brought up something really important there, and it was the concept of learning from experience. You are able to have some of these extremely beneficial ideas because you've been now in this nonprofit space, in this computer refurbishing space for 5 years now, maybe
Mm-hmm.
5, 6 years. That's another thing that I think is invaluable. And people, when we talk about burning out because they're trying to just get rich quick, it ties well into that, right? You don't know, you learn so much when you go into a space. And that's why the people that, like you said earlier, immediately succeed, right? When they jump into something, right?
Yeah.
When they might have a great idea and be jumping into a space that really actually needs the solution. And it still might take a little bit of time just because they have no experience in that industry.
Yeah.
And that's where mentors obviously come in to speed up that process. And like you said, fail faster to improve better, right? Can you speak a little bit on just you've been able to stay consistent with this and continue working on it for 5 years, starting when you were 16? When most people are 16, they might have a good idea, but being able to stick with it for 5 years is extremely rare to start. And then also just the advantages that has given you because you've stuck with it and learned so much about this industry in particular and this kind of the niche that you are in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people value that sometimes as much as they should. And so just speak a little bit on the consistency aspect, sticking with it, 'cause where would you be if you had given it up, sort of thing?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to be the best at something, you got to put a lot of time in. And I've realized that over the years, going to these conferences, these people have been in the industry for 25 years, 30 years. Like, how am I supposed to compete with that level of, you know, insight into the whole industry? You can't unless you spend the same amount of time as them or just know as much as them. So like, I have a competitive edge because I think I'm younger than most of the people in the industry. I have access to really cool, technical people. That's sort of like I think my edge. So now I just need to know as much as these people in the industry, and then combining the two, that can create something really unique. Um, we're seeing this right now with pavement as well. Like we're talking to people that have been in the parking industry for 40 years. Um, and that's like essential to be able to talk to these people that are like, you know, they're the holy grail of parking, these people. Um, so it just takes disciplined entrepreneurship, as you said.
For sure. Switching gears a little bit now, Dylan. One of the other things we wanted to talk about a little bit more on the personal side, as away from business, is personal finance.
Yeah.
What are some of the big lessons you've learned out of, or you've gotten out of personal finance? Maybe mistakes you've made along the way, as well.
Hmm. I've always been very like conservative with my money. I'm very frugal. Like I don't spend a lot of money on anything. So like since I was younger, I've always been like kind of building up money. You know, I'm lucky to be able to, to get money for my birthday, when I was younger. And have a great family where I didn't need to like work when I was a child. So I was able to build up a little bit of money. And then I started these businesses where I would always, make the profit, save it, you know, ever so often I go to Chipotle or something. But other than that, I wouldn't buy anything fancy that I couldn't like resell also. Like that was always my mindset. Like if I'm gonna buy something, it's an investment and I should be able to resell it, 3 to 5 years for a little bit less value. Whatever value I'm getting out of it, I should be able to, sell it for a little under that. But now that, with computers for people's growing a lot, I just started, after 5 years of working, uh, starting the beginning of this year, I started getting a salary. So now I'm, making a full-time, not really a full-time salary, but making a salary, going to school, and I'm probably in the lowest tax bracket that I'll ever be. So now I'm trying to save my money. I like opened a Roth IRA recently, trying to put money into it every week. But yeah, I'm trying to like, obviously my goal is to make a lot of money, but you need to always have the idea that, at one point I could have no money and I want to be safe rather than sorry. So yeah, that's my mindset. What is yours?
Well, one thing you said there too that I liked, I talked on episode 6 with Gabe Riegert about the idea of with personal finance. His take on it was playing a long game and playing a short game.
Hmm.
His short game, which is actually a long game, but like the get rich quick, right, is his business from the personal finance side of things. He's like, if that pays off, like if that all works out, the hard work we're putting in pays off, we'll get rich, quick. It won't be easy, but it's like once the business goes, that's the goal, obviously,
Yeah.
is to have it grow quickly. But he's like, I also look at it from the long end of things, of like, so that I am still putting money away into a Roth IRA. I am still investing for the long term, because he's like, in case, then I also have this other side of things, this other funnel of money that is growing still. The eighth wonder of the world, compound interest, right? Working in your favor as opposed to against you with inflation.
Mm-hmm.
So you ask about my own personal take on it. I am very similar to you, I would say, as far as I've always been a very frugal person. Similar growing up situation as well, right? I had a home life where I wasn't required to work all the time as a kid. I would get some money on my birthdays, that sort of thing. And yeah, I never spent any of that. Like I just didn't have an interest in spending it ever. So I invested every penny I ever had.
Hmm.
And I would oftentimes, look at things of like, yeah, I could buy this book, like, for $20. And a book's a bad example because I do find some value from certain books, but I could buy this item. I could go out to eat all the time. People be like, oh, hey, let's get fast food on our way
Yeah.
back from a baseball game or any other sporting event. And I would just be like, nah, like I could spend $20. I could get $20 worth of Chipotle
The amount of people that are door dashing right now and spending $40 on a dinner is insane. The amount of people I know that are doing that on a daily basis, and they wonder why they don't have any money.
Dude, I've done that
It's
like
crazy.
once or twice, I would say, when we were on college baseball trips, and we DoorDash and get Cold Stone ice cream a couple times,
Uh-huh.
and then I would pay like $17 or something just absurd, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm never doing this again. Like it's just crazy. But yeah. So as far as that aspect of personal finance goes, I've always been kind of frugal like that. Budget, I've never had a budget up until recently. I've never had a actual budget that I look at, but I've just always had that mindset where I just wouldn't ever really spend anything. So there wasn't
Hmm.
really a total necessity to have a budget. Another thing that I would always do is I put down a 100% match clause on any spending I did that was discretionary spending, as opposed to spending on needs. Um, so anytime I bought anything that was discretionary, so if I went out to fast food and paid $15, I was required to 100% match that into my investment accounts, and that's just
Wow.
a rule I have with myself, because I was like, if I really want this, if I want to pay $10, well, if I want it bad enough to pay $20, right? Because I'm going to
Yeah,
invest the other 10. If I want it bad enough to pay double what it is, then I'll get it, and I'll still be benefiting myself down the long run, even though it's hurting my short term finances, I guess. But that was a rule that I had throughout college, and it served me pretty well for the most part.
that's cool. That's cool. Um,
Um,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I don't even know what else to add, but my stocks have not been doing well the past couple years. That's another thing. I mean, I have fun with that, and now I'm like, okay, it's time to try and make 8% per year, and then just like stay in the safe game. I don't know. Hopefully.
One thing I brought up there when I had said that it was maybe a poor example was books on the discretionary. And for the record, that is still a discretionary expense. I would treat that as such and do the 100% match.
Hmm.
Well, for a lot of people, they can find a lot of value in books. Have you had that experience, or have other avenues of learning, whether it be an online course or a podcast or YouTube? Because YouTube can be an extremely beneficial um, learning source of knowledge, right? And it can also be an extremely big time waster.
Hmm.
I always look at things through the lens of um, everything has an equal and opposite, reaction or inverse, right? So atomic energy, you can power the world with it. You can also destroy the world with it, right?
Uh-huh.
Artificial intelligence, people talk about the incredible benefits of it. People talk about the incredible, downsides of it. Smaller items, like, just smaller everyday things, they have less of a positive effect on you, but they also have less of a potential downside. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So with something like YouTube, I think it does have it. I mean, you could learn essentially anything on it,
Yeah.
and you can also be distracted to no end. So that's another source where I think a lot of people will say that they're learning from, and that maybe they're learning for one video and then watching it for another 20 minutes or 2 hours and not getting much out
Yeah.
of it after that. But as far as books go, I hear differing opinions. Some people really think they are extremely valuable, and obviously we're talking like certain kind of books here, not just a fantasy novel, which I
Yeah.
would enjoy every now and then. But um, as far as those books go, some other people think that they're just not actually that beneficial, and you just read them to kind of get the idea that you're accomplishing something, but you're
Hmm.
not actually really. So I'm curious to hear your take on that, Dylan.
Yeah, I'm the worst person to ask about books. I don't read at all. Like I had one assignment for school where we had to read the whole book. I got an audiobook and started listening to it at like 3 times speed because I just like I'm I'm a slow reader and my reading comprehension skills are not great. Um, but for my other two co-founders, they're constantly trying to get me to read. They're trying to get me to read these books about like negotiations and business and stories about entrepreneurship. Um, and it all sounds great to me, but when I look at the book and start reading it, I don't have a pleasant time. Um, I'm more of a video and movie type of guy, I would say. Um, videos, the quick tutorials on YouTube have taught me more than any book has ever taught me, probably. Um, movies, you know, just an art form that I enjoy. I said I like creating videos earlier. Um, you know, movies, I learn a lot from, and I just enjoy getting absorbed into the story, which I can't do with books for some reason.
I think movies are an underrated thing in that regard. I personally have like a kryptonite, like a problem that I can't watch a movie if I don't think I'm gonna like get something out of it. Like if
Hmm.
it's just a dumb, like people, my some of my friends will make fun of me all the time because I've like never seen like Step Brothers, or like I've never watched like Dumb and Dumber,
Uh-huh.
movies like that where I'm like,
Those are like stupid movies, right?
yeah, where I'm like, if I can't get anything out of it, I'm not gonna, in my opinion, waste my time watching it. And that's different. I'm not saying other people's opinions are wrong when they enjoy those, but that's just always been something for me that. But what I do think is underrated is movies that do actually have deep underlying meaning, deep underlying lessons to learn. I'm sure people would argue that all movies have that. Maybe I'm just too stupid to see them in Dumb and Dumber, but some movies that have deeper meaning that I think you actually can learn some things from that are extremely applicable to life. I think that's an underrated way of learning. Obviously, can certainly be used to not learn anything from it and just enjoy the entertainment, and that's fine too. But I've always liked reading. I think school material is obviously quite different. Reading that, anytime you're required to do anything, I mean, it's a psychological human fact that you get less enjoyment out of it, right? They always use the example of, if you wanted to, in Minnesota especially, if you want to shovel, the sidewalk for your parents, maybe your dad would wants you to shovel the sidewalk, but today he didn't ask you, so you want to surprise him. Well, if you're planning to do it at 3:00 because they're not getting home until 5, and then all of a sudden, right when you're walking out the door to do it, they come home, and then he says, "Hey, can you go shovel the sidewalk?" Well, now you immediately don't want to.
Yeah.
You did 100% wanted to do the same exact task, and then as soon as, because you didn't get that joy, that fulfillment out of the surprise and how happy you would have made them. Instead, you're just fulfilling an order. So that's something where with books, I think it's a pretty similar concept on that end. But yeah, I've always liked reading, but I did like what you brought up too about watching the videos on like 3x speed or listening to that audiobook on 3x speed.
Yeah.
Because that is one thing for me where when I shift to like, I do enjoy having a handheld book at times, but like when I'm listening to podcasts, it's at least 2x speed. It should be at least 2x speed, maybe 2.5, sometimes 3 or 3.5 on Spotify, because then I'm just sitting there like absorbing it and thinking about the words, right? And they're just whipping through, and I can get done with it so much quicker. Where the speed that I read, like I don't think I'm a particularly slow reader, but I don't think I'm a particularly fast reader. If I'm really trying to understand the material, where audiobooks, like you said too, I can see that avenue of maybe not 3x speed, but speeding it up a little bit to kind of streamline that process, as I like to say, I think would be efficient. And that's how my brain works, is efficiency, I guess. So, Dylan, it was super awesome having you on. I really enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully we'll be able to do it again. I am wishing you the best with both Computers for People and Pavement. Hopefully one will, they'll both change the world for the better.
One will make it out alive. We'll see.
They'll both change the world for the better. Hopefully one will do a lot of good and the other one will make you a lot of money.
We'll see. Only time will tell.
That's right. Nice having you on, Dylan.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.